Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington as the economy reaches an unsettling new milestone. The U.S. debt hitting $40 trillion for the first time as President Trump continues to face economic headwinds just months before the midterm elections. All while he threatens what he's calling economic warfare at an unprecedented scale on Iran as that war continues to drive up energy prices. The debt has exploded over several administrations. It rose nearly $8 trillion during the first Trump administration. It rose by more than $8 trillion under President Biden, and it's risen by trillions of dollars under Mr. Trump's second administration. The White House, however, downplaying the new marker and blaming the Biden administration for the rising debt.
Look, the 40 trillion is a big number. It is smaller when we look at the publicly traded amount because our Social Security funds and other government entities hold a substantial amount. And what we're going to do, we're going to have to grow our way out of this. And remember, we did not get here in a day. That we were left with a mess. The Biden administration had the highest deficit to GDP in history when we weren't at war or weren't in a recession. For 2025, we brought it down by more than 1%.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also telling CNBC there's a very good chance the budget deficit under President Trump has already peaked. The soaring debt only adding to concerns about inflation, which comes as President Trump is underwater on his handling of the cost of living, inflation, and the economy. Meanwhile, the war with Iran continues to drive up fuel prices here at home. The national average for gas at $4.10 a gallon today, while oil prices are up roughly 30% a barrel since the start of the war. And now President Trump is ramping up economic warfare against Iran. In a post on social media, the president announcing, quote, the most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country, and going on to call it an economic D-Day. But the president and the Treasury Secretary offering few details on what those sanctions could be.
What else could be sanctioned on Iran?
Well, we have things that we could sanction. We have very draconian sanctions, and we'll see what happens.
The economic pressure means that we are going to all of our allies, and this is going to be the greatest coordinated economic isolation in the history of the world. And we are going to them and saying, you are either with us or against us. It is time for our allies and the rest of the world to make a decision. And we are going to squash the economy of this murderous regime.
But Iran's foreign minister claiming this latest threat against Tehran is just a distraction from the president's own domestic woes, saying, quote, the so-called economic D-Day is a diversion from America's own crisis, unprecedented debt, and surging interest costs. Joining me now is NBC News business and economy reporter Allie, Canal, NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapur is at the White House, and also with me is Ravi Agrawal, editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. Thanks to all of you for being here. Allie, let me start with you. We know that this increase in the debt didn't happen overnight. It has happened over several administrations. But how did the country get to $40 trillion in debt?
Yeah, Kristen, it is important to remember that this is pretty party agnostic. This is something that both Democrats and Republicans have been dealing with for quite some time now. And if we zoom in over the past decade or so, COVID, that was pretty much a huge accelerant. 2 years of massive spending, trillions of dollars to fund some of those pandemic relief programs. You also, though, had some major policy choices under both President Biden and President Trump when it comes to spending. So Biden really spending aggressively on infrastructure, on clean energy initiatives. Then you have President Trump, the one big beautiful bill, massive tax cuts, increased spending to military, immigration enforcement. That's part of the reason why this administration has leaned so heavily into tariffs to try and bring more revenue into the United States. But as we saw earlier this year, the Supreme Court striking down those emergency tariffs, and now the government is actually having to give back some of that money. Then you also have these longer term structural issues within the economy. We have an aging population that requires more spending on things like Medicare and Social Security. And you also have these just inflationary inflationary pressures across the board. And the result is this national debt that's doubled since 2017, $40 trillion. That's about 123% of the size of the entire U.S. economy. But what analysts are so concerned with right now is how much it's costing to carry that debt, the interest on that debt, because the government has spent nearly $1.2 trillion on interest alone so far this year. And that's actually on pace to surpass what we spend on something like Medicare. And that's creating a lot of jitters in the bond market right now. We're seeing this surge in longer term treasury yields. And that's where this starts to impact everyday Americans, because that affects things like mortgage rates, the loan you pay on your car, credit card bills, business to business borrowing. So there are some clear economic consequences here.
So let me follow up with you on that point, Allie, because there has been turmoil in the bond market. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has intervened in the markets, or at least he's trying to. What exactly is he doing, and could it work?
Yeah, really surprising announcement from the U.S. Treasury Department, basically saying that the U.S. government is going to buy back some of this longer term debt, but they're going to double it. So they were going to buy back this debt, $2 billion. Now they're doubling that to $4 billion. And Treasury Secretary Bessent earlier today suggesting that number could be even higher. And you can basically think of this as the government reshuffling some of its debt, trying to calm the bond market down and bring those long-term interest rates lower. And it initially worked. We did see the 30-year yield fall pretty sharply after that initial announcement, but we are seeing yields tick up once again. We have stocks falling across the board, all three major indices closing the day in the red. And a big reason why is that this doesn't address the fundamental concerns. The government still has $40 trillion in debt. It's still borrowing a lot of money. And inflation concerns, they're not going away anytime soon. We have this ongoing war with Iran that's boosting energy prices. All of that is contributing to these fears in the bond market. So, you know, what the answer is, I think that remains to be seen. And that's why this is so important right now.
Yeah, and I know you're going to track it closely, Allie. Thank you so much for helping us understand a complicated set of facts there. Really appreciate it. Sahil, let me turn to you at the White House. What are your sources there telling you about how concerned they are about this $40 trillion figure and what the impact might be on the midterms? Is there an urgency to address the debt?
Well, quite simply, Kristen, there is no urgency whatsoever at the White House or in the Republican-led Congress to take action that would reduce the national debt. If anything, the agenda of this Republican trifecta over the last year and a half has been adding more red ink through the president's big, beautiful bill, which added an estimated $3.4 trillion to the debt, according to the nonpartisan CBO. They had another party line bill that would add $72 billion to the national debt by increasing immigration enforcement. There were also tax cuts in the previous one. There's now a third attempt by President Trump for a party line bill that would add $95 billion to the debt, put that on the credit card through aid to farmers, election enforcement, increasing the military. Trump, in fact, wants to increase military spending from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion, which would be a massive increase. There's no way he's going to get that in Congress, but if he even gets close, it means Democrats are going to want more spending on the domestic front, which is the pattern we've seen in these annual appropriations bills. Democrats want more spending on the domestic side. Republicans want more on the military side. So they just keep adding more and more red ink. So I don't see that changing anytime in the foreseeable future. Where this does potentially hit the kitchen table is going down the road. If interest rates continue to increase, if debt continues to pile up, and there are real consequences of the sort that we had not seen for the last decade and a half, it could hit consumers directly in terms of mortgages, car payments, things like that. They're not quite there yet. I think the inflation and rising costs are the more near-term significant problem that Republicans face in the midterms, Kristen.
Well, Sahil, let's talk about this economic D-Day that President Trump talked about. What exactly is it? Are you getting any more information about the specifics? Because as we just showed, the president and the Treasury Secretary aren't giving a whole lot of details.
Yeah, short answer, Kristen, the White House is not revealing its cards here. The Treasury Secretary said earlier today that he plans to roll this out on Monday, to make the announcement on Monday, and he didn't quite specify what it would entail. I think the big question is what sorts of tools does the administration have to further economically isolate a country like Iran, which is already so heavily isolated. I think more notable in what the president said when he made this announcement is that he wants tremendous consequences against any country or entity that provides support to Iran? Is he talking about China? Is he talking about Russia? Bessent was also asked about that today. He did not reveal the answer to that, said those discussions are to be left private. I think one thing we can take away from this is Bessent downplayed the idea of additional bombing. He said any large-scale kinetic restart is unlikely to happen. Kristen.
That certainly is a significant headline. Sahil Kapur, thank you for your reporting from the White House. Ravi Agrawal, let me turn to you. If you would, pick up on where Sahil just left off, which is what is left for the U.S. to actually sanction in Iran. It's already so heavily sanctioned.
It is. And look, part of the issue here is that the more you sanction an already sanctioned country, it just hardens its ways. I mean, look at North Korea, for example. Decades of sanctions haven't really changed its behavior. I think the biggest issue to look at here is how China reacts, because China gets about 80% of Iran's oil. Were the United States to follow through on targeting and sanctioning entities that do business with Iran, that would mean some form of retaliation on China, which is possible theoretically, but we shouldn't forget that China itself has retaliated on American tariffs in the past year to the extent of cutting off its supplies of rare earths, critical minerals, magnets that go into the manufacturing of semiconductors, automakers. China now has the ability to shut down supply chains for some of the world's biggest companies. And that is the reason why the United States has been very reluctant since last year to try and commit any actions against China. All of that, I think, makes potential action on Iran much weaker.
Well, and to that point, I mean, if the United States were to impose new sanctions on Iran, on countries that do business with Iran, who ultimately would pay the price? Would it be the people of Iran? The leadership does not seem to be moved very much by its own people suffering.
That is one of the biggest problems here. Take, for example, sanctions on, say, pharmaceutical companies. So let's say it becomes even harder than it already is for regular Iranians to buy medicines, any supplies for healthcare. They're the ones who are going to suffer. You know, in a normal circumstance, when you sanction a country that cares about its people, you might be able to change its behavior. In the case of the Iranian regime, they have already shown that they are willing to impose immense costs on their own people, therefore making it much harder to do anything that would hurt them directly. So Trump is in a very difficult situation with Iran. He doesn't want to go back to war. He's running out of munitions. He's running out of leverage. And really, I see this latest move as an announcement without much detail and possibly just a distraction. I wouldn't rule out further kinetic action, as Bessent said, because, you know, maybe that might be an option they do have to resort to. This is an administration that has obfuscated, distracted in the past, but really they are mired in a war in the Middle East with no good outcomes.
Is Iran basically waiting out the president? Is that a potential strategy that we're seeing unfold here?
I think so, but it's important to remember that if you have a very long time horizon, let's say 4, 5, 6 years, there is little doubt that the United States can punish Iran to a degree that will make it fold, whether it's economically or military. But this won't go on that long. I think Iran's calculation is to wait it out until at least the midterms cause immense economic pain to the United States economy, but also the global economy. And so if they play a shorter term, medium term game, then they feel they can wait out the United States. If Trump is suddenly willing to withstand a lot more economic pain than we know that he is, then this changes.
Ravi Agrawal, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Well, as we mentioned, the economy and affordability are top of mind for voters as we inch closer to the midterm elections, including in key battlegrounds, where a recent Fox News poll found the top issue for voters across 7 states was inflation and high prices, far surpassing the next most important issue. In the latest edition of our focus group series produced by Syracuse University and the research firms Engagious and Sago, we spoke to undecided voters in Georgia and Iowa, 2 of those states with key Senate races this November. Here's what some of them told us about their view of the economy. Take a look.
Who would say the state of the economy is a big consideration in how you plan to vote in this year's midterm elections? State of the economy. All 5 of you. The state of the economy is a big consideration in how you plan to vote. 6 of you.
Everything is inflated. A lot of people who are in the lower economy are struggling more than they have before.
I have to drive 45 minutes just to be able to afford my groceries, but then you're dealing with the gas prices on top of that. In the lower middle class where I sit, we're being killed.
Prices, tariffs, just making things more expensive.
Just the basic cost of living, gas prices, food prices.
Going to the grocery store, trying to buy groceries, trying to pay for gas.
Even my utilities have gone up tremendously since last summer. What else can I do to lower the cost or make more money? I feel like I'm doing so much.
Joining me now is Margaret Talev, director of Syracuse University's Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship Institute. Margaret, thanks for being here. It's always great to have you. So I want to play a little bit more sound because the group also talked about President Trump's handling of the economy. I want to play that. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I think the president's more concerned about himself. I think the people behind him are trying to work on ways to improve the economy, but the person in front is not.
Flat out said on camera, he does not care about it. He does not care that we're paying $4 a gallon or over.
Honestly, it comes down to just nothing has gotten better as far as the cost of living, inflation, food is astronomical.
Shutting down the strait over there, by shutting it down, it's getting us less supplies over here, less gas over here, so the prices are going up a lot.
The war in Iran, the Epstein files, high gas prices, which in turn means high grocery prices. Things like that are just not quite where I think that they should be.
Disillusioned with pretty much everything he's done since he took office. He's more worried about his vanity projects, like the reflecting pool and his ballroom, than he is with the real problems in this country.
It's not like it's unusual from a politician, but those are pretty big deals to promise and then not fulfill those promises.
Margaret, these focus groups are always so fascinating and revealing. And we should say many of those voters actually voted for President Trump in 2024. Did any of them say they regretted their vote?
Yeah, so this is 9 out of the 12 voted for President Trump. This is not a group of raging liberals. I think there was one Democrat in this group, and the others were split between independents and Republicans. So that's what we're talking about here. You still have plenty of people in this group who are super skeptical of Democrats, concerned about socialism in the Democratic Party or the DSA, but roundly, uniformly, President Trump they're disappointed in his performance, including people who voted for him, including people who still want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Disappointed. Almost all, I think all but one, said the economy is going to be a major factor in how they vote in November, and a majority saying that their disappointment with him will play some role in how they think about voting.
Well, to take that to the next level, you're talking about Georgia and Iowa, which have two big Senate and gubernatorial races. By the way, if the economy plays a role in how they vote, I mean, in those big races, do you think they actually, will weigh in that way?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Democrats hope that's what happens, but here's some reasons why that isn't such a sure thing, right? Many of these voters did not make the tactical connection. They're like, we're disappointed in Trump. We're really worried about the economy. It's going to factor on our vote. But then you go to the next question. Would you vote for Democrats to try to change the balance of power in Congress to block Trump? And they're like, what? So it's not sort of strategic, but it's more emotional. It's a feeling. A couple other things that we really noticed in Iowa, a lot of concern about the tariffs and the impact that the tariffs have had. In Georgia, a different concern, data centers. And you're seeing this in the polling now. I mean, Gallup showing data centers have become a top 5 issue. My colleagues at Axios writing about Republicans being quite concerned in Ohio in particular about data centers. We saw this here in the conversation with Georgia voters. 3 out of the 4 voters saying their data centers are something they're watching very closely. 3 out of the 4 saying in a negative way they're watching it.
Well, it's so interesting. And that conversation about data centers really playing out in so many races in key battleground states. Margaret, is there any area where they gave President Trump high marks uniformly?
Actually, I don't think so. There were a couple who said that, they think he's trying or, but this is a real change over the course of time that we've been doing these focus groups. And the stock market is an area where about 2/3 of these voters are in the market. And so it's not necessarily they're crediting Trump, but they're like, yeah, we feel good. We look at, our holdings and they've gone up. We feel cautiously optimistic. But then we go to the grocery store or the gas pump and it's a disaster and we can't touch the money in our 401k. This is what we're living with every day. One of my favorite parts of these focus groups, Rich, our moderator, who you see there.
Who does such a fantastic job.
He's the best, right?
Yeah.
Asking, have you had to give anything up because of affordability? And their answers were so personal that they really grab your attention. One of the participants said, I had to stop buying orange juice. It was like a frivolity. I couldn't make the case for orange juice anymore. Another guy said he had bought himself a really nice laptop and realized he was going to have to sell it to cover his bases. And then for other people, I'm not going out to eat. I stopped buying clothes. So some of it are little things. Some of them are really big, tangible things, but all the way down to the orange juice on your kitchen counter.
It's just fascinating. Those types of hard choices so often inform what people do at the ballot box. Margaret Tolliver, thank you. Great conversation, great information as always. Really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.